Students, in this video, you are going to learn about the gas exchange, and this is the second step in the respiratory system processes that you will learn in this chapter. In the previous video, we have discussed about the ventilation process, and you have done some activities in the class as well, including the hands-on activity using the model of the lungs and the balloon that we learned together about the ventilation process. Now, the next step is the gas exchange, and gas exchange happens in the alveoli of the lungs. Before we continue with the details of the gas exchange process, it is better we review the anatomy of the lungs. As you can see from this picture, I want to focus on the anatomy of the bronchioles and the alveoli. Now, you can see from the picture that the alveoli are surrounded by the blood capillaries. Again, the function of the blood capillaries surrounding the small alveoli is to ensure a large surface area for the gas exchange to happen. So on this slide, you can see the detailed anatomy of bronchioles and alveoli. The first picture on the left top, you can see the bronchiole, alveolus number 2, and pulmonary capillary number 3. Alveolus is basically one little structure that looks like a grape. The whole or the collection of the grapes or the alveolus, it's called the alveolar sac. Number 4, you can see the diagram below the first one. And of course, the plural word for alveolus is alveoli, as you can see also from the diagram on the left bottom. Now, imagine if there is a plate in between number 1 and number 2, the first diagram. Imagine that the plate is something that cut the structure. So we call it as a cross-section. Under the microscope, the cross-section will look like the picture on your right on the slide. So you can see that this alveoli, number 2, looks like the curvy lines that creates like bubble under the microscope. And you can see the bronchi that looks like a big pipe here, and the bronchioles you can see as smaller pipes or the circle, right? And the alveolar sac number 4, you can see that it is actually one big collection of alveoli. And you can also see capillaries. Those capillaries are very small because maybe you have learned before in the circulatory system, capillaries are the smallest blood vessels so that it can be located in a very small space. Again, the function is to increase the surface area. Now, these are the closer looks of alveoli under the microscope with bigger or larger magnification power. On this slide, you can see there are two types of alveoli cells, or we call it pneumocytes. That is type 1 pneumocytes and type 2 pneumocyte. The diagram on the right gives a better understanding of what you can see from the other picture or on the left. Here in the diagram on the right, you can see the difference between pneumocyte type 2 and type 1 very clearly. Pneumocyte type 1 is a cell that is so flat and very thin, while pneumocyte type 2 is a cell that is bigger and shorter and is thicker. You also can see the capillaries, the cross-section of the capillaries there, and inside the capillaries you can see also the red blood cells. Now, with different structures of the pneumocytes type 1 and type 2, you can expect that they have or carry different function. We will see the different functions of those two cells in the next slide. So in this slide, you are going to see the detailed structures and function of pneumocytes type 1 and type 2. And this slide the information belonged to BioNinja, so I took it from BioNinja. So for type 1 pneumocytes, let me read it, are involved in the process of gas exchange between alveoli and capillaries. So you can see from the picture number 1 that type 1 tend to be located next to the blood capillaries. And you may have learned that in the digestive system and in the circulatory system before that the thickness of the cell determine the speed of the diffusion or the process of the transfer of materials between cells. So that's why the shape of pneumocyte type 1 is so flat, because the function of it is to support the process of the gas exchange between the alveoli and the capillaries. And by having a flattened shape, it will minimize the distance for the diffusion of the gases between the alveoli and the blood capillaries. And the next one is type 2 pneumocyte. Now, you can see from the picture number 2 here, the pneumocytes are a cell that has so many granules. So what is inside the granules? Granules are basically fascicles that containing something in it. Now the granules containing surfactant. Now what is the function of the surfactant? The function of the surfactant is to reduce surface tension in the alveoli. It's okay if you don't understand surfactant for now, because I'm going to explain in more detail manner about the surfactant in this next slide. Talking about the surface tension and surfactant, I want you to review back to your topic 2 about biochemistry. At the beginning of the chapter, we learned together about the hydrogen bond between the water molecules. I hope you still remember that the hydrogen bond also creates cohesion. And cohesion means the attraction between the same types of molecule. If cohesion happens on the surface of the water, it then will create surface tension. So this is a picture on the left, the first picture. You can see that on the top of this water surface, you can see a paper clip. Paper clips are mostly made of metal. Metal should sink inside the water, right? Now, however, if you place the paper clip very carefully on the surface of the water without breaking the surface tension, actually the surface tension is strong enough to hold the weight of the paper clip. So, however, if you can try this at home, you can put a drop of detergent on the surface of the water with the paper clip floating on it. The detergent will reduce the surface tension, and as the result, the paper clip will sink to the bottom of the glass. You can try this at home. So how this explanation about the surface tension explain the need of surfactant inside the alveoli? You can see the diagram or the picture on your right side. Now the top part says without surfactant. Now alveoli is wet, moist, all right, with the water molecule. And as you have learned before, that water molecules tend to attract each other, which is attraction called cohesion. Now, if the water molecule attract with each other, it means that the alveoli will collapse or shrink, because the water molecule inside it will attract each other to the center of the alveoli, and the alveoli will collapse or shrink. However, with surfactant, which for example in our body is called the natural detergent, similar to the detergent that you can find in the cleaning product, but this is produced naturally by our body. The surfactant will reduce the surface tension, and as a result, the cohesion between the water molecule will be reduced as well. Therefore, the risk for the alveoli to collapse or to shrink become less because of the existence of the surfactant. And it is important for the alveoli not to get shrink or collapse, because it is the place for the gas to enter, right? The alveoli provide room for the gas to enter, and then to be able to do gas exchange with the blood capillaries around it. And then this is a review about simple diffusion. Why we want to do review about the simple diffusion? Because basically the process of gas exchange that happen between the alveolus and the blood capillaries are based on the diffusion or simple diffusion principle. So we can see from this picture, simple diffusion means the movement of molecules from higher concentration to lower concentration or down the concentration gradient through the membrane without any protein channel. Why the molecule, why they do not need facility like the protein channel to pass through the bilayer or the membrane, the plasma membrane. It is because the size of the molecules is very small, so they can sneak through in between the phospholipid molecules. All right. Now, this process will keep on happening until there is an equilibrium or the same concentration between the two sides of the surrounding the cell membrane. So now let's apply the concept of simple diffusion to the gas exchange process in the respiratory system. Now, the first diagram on your left, through the nose or maybe through the mouth when we are swimming, for example, we inhale mostly oxygen if you are in a place that is filled with fresh air, right? So mostly should be oxygen compared to carbon dioxide. Oxygen should be higher in concentration. Okay, that's a healthy environment for you to breathe in. Now the oxygen will go and enter the bronchus. Okay, the trachea first, and then the bronchus and the bronchioles, and then the alveoli. Now you can see the diagram below the first one with the green arrow. The red dots inside the alveolus is or represent the oxygen molecules, while the gray ones represent the carbon dioxide molecules. When you inhale fresh air, the concentration of the oxygen will be high. Therefore, simple diffusion happens from the alveolus to the blood capillaries. Why? Because the capillaries bring the blood that is low in oxygen but high in carbon dioxide. So as the result, the carbon dioxide will diffuse out from the blood capillaries to the alveolus, while the oxygen will diffuse into the blood capillaries from the alveolus. Because the concentration of oxygen is higher in the alveolus compared to the capillaries. And on your left, you can see animation of how the carbon dioxide leaves the capillaries and enter alveolus, while the oxygen from alveolus enter the blood in the capillaries. And this is the last but not the least. This is a real life situation that we can see the application of this concept. So it happened in 1990 when I was a teenager. I still remember this incident. So if you are familiar with the Islam religion, because Islam is the main religion in Indonesia, so I heard from the news that the Muslim that have to do this pilgrim's journey to Mecca, they were suffocated when they had to travel from one point to another in the process of the ritual process. So they enter a tunnel, but for some reason, somehow, there were too many people, more than what was allowed to enter at once. The tunnel was about like 550 meters, so you can imagine it is a long tunnel. And back then what I heard that the ventilation system in the tunnel was somehow didn't work well. So as the result, the pilgrims were suffocated inside the tunnel, and there were lots of people died in the incident. It was said here it's about 1,426 people. Now, why they experienced that incident because the high concentration accumulated because of the respiration process that was done by all people in the tunnel. And thus, the concentration of oxygen in the tunnel was depleted. In normal condition where the ventilation works well and the number of people who visited the sacred place through the tunnel was limited, this incident should not happen. However, somehow on that day, because of the errors, then lots of pilgrims were suffocated. Therefore, actually by doing ventilation alone is not enough to ensure that our blood will receive the right amount of oxygen that we need, because the next or the second process that happens in the respiratory system after ventilation is gas exchange, and gas exchange works based on the concentration gradient concept. So if the air outside is higher in carbon dioxide and lower in oxygen, when you do the ventilation, actually the air that you put into your alveolus will contain more carbon dioxide compared to the concentration of carbon dioxide in your capillaries. So you can guess that rather than letting the carbon dioxide to escape from the capillaries and enter the alveolus or diffuse out from the capillaries, more carbon dioxide will enter the capillaries. And this situation is going to be very, very dangerous for your body because a very high concentration of carbon dioxide in your blood will become toxic. Alright, so I hope you understand the concept of the gas exchange as the second step that happens in the respiratory system after ventilation. In the next video, you are going to learn about the diseases that happens in the respiratory system that consists of emphysema and the lung cancer.